My amiable scholars, good afternoon. Dr. Alexander Jacinta, how are you?
Fine.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yeah, afternoon. Let's quickly start our lecture because we don't have lots of time. We have maybe 1 hour, 30 minutes. Today, we are looking at corporate governance. I think the first aspect of corporate governance. Uh, first thing that we are starting with today is just to look at the overview of corporate governance, the differences between corporate governance and the management. Uh, Still in today's, we are still going to look at the Sabler-Oxen theory, workers theory, corporate governance, uh, board balance. These are some of the things that we are required to discuss. So, to start with, what is corporate governance? It can be defined, it can be defined through which a company are directed and controlled. I repeat that again. Corporate governance refers to the system by which a company is directed and controlled. So, with that ongoing definition, we are made to understand that corporate governance discuss majorly on the relationship between the owners of the company and the directors. It's further stated that corporate governance is the system through which the company is being managed, directed, and controlled by appointed directors. Because the owners of the companies are the shareholders, the investors that invested their sweat capitals. They finance and manage this company, and they have the objective of achieving profit maximization and accumulation of wealth and expansion of business. So because of the constitution governing the company law, so we have to appoint certain people that we call the directors to manage the affair of this company with utmost good faith, transparency, and by putting the interests of the shareholders first before any other thing. So that means the interests of the directors must not conflict with the interest. Hello, what do you say? The interests of the directors must not conflict with that of the owners of the company. So corporate governance, in summary, focus on the use of power, avoidance of insubordination of interest, provision of strategic direction, and achieving of performance management. So, having discussed the definition of corporate governance, so we can now look at it that governance should not be confused with management. Why? Because there is distinction between the two. For instance, look at the first paragraph. Management is concerned with the running of the business operation of a company. That is what management is all about. It's concerned with operational management of the business activities of the company. But when we are talking of governance, governance is about taking a lead, monitoring, and controlling management decision so that the company can be able to achieve their intended purpose. Secondly, management is about making business decisions, while governance is about monitoring and controlling decision, including the provision of strategic directions, pathway on what to do for us to achieve our results, and as well as giving leadership role. So corporate governance is not about management activities and management risks or management techniques. Rather, corporate governance is concerned about the power of the executive management to direct a business and also concern on how those powers are being used effectively by the directors for the company to achieve sustainable growth and landmark results. So what are the areas or aspects that corporate governance is concerned about? The corporate governance is concerned with matters such as one, in whose interest is a company governed? That is one fundamental question being raised under corporate governance. So when we say in whose interest a company governed, the simple answer is this: the company should be governed in the interest of the shareholders, the owners of the company. Two, who has the power to make decisions for a company? Once the directors have been appointed, the board of directors have the power to make decisions on behalf of the company and at times subject to the ratification of the shareholders. But this decision must be done in a way to protect the interests and investments of the shareholders. So that is number two. Number three, for what aims or purpose are those powers used? Those powers are being used to direct, to control, to monitor, and to see to effective governance and management of the portfolio of investment of the shareholders. Another question that arises under corporate governance is that in what manner are those powers used? Those powers must be used with honesty, transparency, accountability, and it must not be used in a way to jeopardize the investment of the shareholders or victimize other employees, including the non-executive directors. So the last question we have here: are the governors of a company held accountable for the way in which they use their power? Yes. That is one of the concepts of corporate governance: accountability. All the governors of the company, the directors of the company, the CEO, the executive directors, executive manager, non-executive directors, independent non-executive directors, all of them are accountable for their decisions and the roles and delegated responsibility. So what do we now understand by separation of ownership and control? The meaning of separation of ownership and control is not something that should give us headache. It's a very simple thing. The separation of ownership and control occur once a company owner, that we refer to as the shareholders, appointed directors. Those directors, having been appointed, have been given the power to direct, control, monitor, and make strategic decisions on behalf of the company. So the separation of ownership and control occur immediately the owners of the company appointed director to take some control measure, coordination decisions, providing directions and management of the resources of the company. But the problem arises here in that this separation of ownership and control always brings a lot of crisis, and that crisis occur due to excessive or abuse use of this power by some of the appointed directors. Because the directors might be using the control measure, the power vested on them for their own selfish interests. So some of these directors, having been appointed and given the autonomy to manage the company's affairs, they might not protect the interests of the shareholders effectively, not to talk of other employees or subordinates that work under them, because they have a strong influence because of the power and authority that has been given to them. So what are the problems that arise due to that separation of ownership? I've assisted you here to simplify it. So the problem arising from the separation of ownership and control are the following. One, the director of a company might be able to run the company in a way that is not in the best interest of the shareholder, and that is bad. And in this place, there is a conflicting interest if this occurs. There is insubordination. Two, the shareholders might not be able to prevent the directors from doing this because the director have most of the power to control what the company does. So it might be extremely difficult to checkmate them, particularly on a regular basis. But if these directors continue with violation of the governance code of contracts, if the directors fail to act within the provision of the law, if the directors fail to protect the interests of the shareholders, such directors can be removed, maybe by mutual agreement or by legal means. Or probably there's one thing we call retirement by rotation. I'm still going to discuss this with you. In the retirement by rotation, the shareholders will stipulate in the letter of appointment of the directors that the directors will only ask for minimum of 3 years, after which they set aside for their performance to be assessed or reviewed. If the directors have not done well, if the directors have not put the interests of the shareholders first, the such directors will now have the opportunity to be reappointed. Okay. Another problem that can arise in the separation of ownership is that when the shareholders of the company are also its directors, so what happened? The problem of corporate governance are much less likely to arise. So what this one is telling us is that when we have a situation whereby some of the shareholders that owns the company, they are members of the board of directors, they are going to have of corporate governance challenges because since they are member of the directors, they will have that capacity to checkmate of power or authority by the directors. And in the same vein, when you look at it, when a company is controlled by majority of the shareholders, what is the implication of that? When a company is being controlled by majority of the shareholders, problem with governance hardly occur because the majority of the owners are controlling the company, majority of them are in the board of directors, and probably part of the majority shareholders that owns the company might be the CEO. So this one will remove the excessive power and insubordination of interest by all the appointed directors. So in ink pencil here, this blue pencil, I inform you that problem with corporate governance generally arise when a company has many different shareholders and there is no majority shareholders. Yes, when we have different shareholders that don't share the same perspective, there is a diverse opinion, lack of unity among them, and we don't have a situation of having a majority shareholder. In this company, we are going to have series of crises because the board of directors and the shareholders will be relatively weak. So as a result of that, the appointed director might take opportunity for this weakness to run the company for the interest of the directors and not that of the shareholders. Similarly, the problem of corporate governance are always severe in large companies. Why? Because the shareholders continually buy and sell their shares so that many shareholders are not long-time investors. This is another technical point. And what this one is telling us is very simple. It's informing us that in some companies, we have a situation whereby the problem of corporate governance always occur and very severe in large companies where shareholders continually buy and sell their shares so that many shareholders are not long-time investors. So what this point is driving at is that in some large companies that issues their shares out, when we have a situation whereby majority of the shareholders sell their shares willingly, the buying and selling of shares is not controlled. So it's occurring repeatedly. We now discover that majority of the old shareholders that established this company together are no longer a member of the company because they have sold their shares. So since they have sold their shares, of shareholders that comes in, they will come in with new attitude, new orientation. They might not even know most of the corporate culture and philosophy. All because all the old shareholders, they are long time investors. They only buy the shares, sell the shares, they trade it to make some profits and cease to be a member of the company. So this one creates a lot of corporate governance problem when there is a persistent selling and buying of shares without retaining some of the experience and the old shareholders. So what of ownership and control in non-corporate entity? The syllabus says we just mentioned this, that we must have an idea of ownership and control in non-corporate entity. The ownership and control is a little bit similar because one, the owner of the company in the non-corporate entity might be the government or it might be the public. And in some instances, the owner of a non-corporate entity might not be the government or the public, but it might be a charity organization that is non-charity organization, or it might be a section of the public, maybe some individual. So who are those in control that manage non-corporate entity? Those in control, in power to manage the non-corporate entity might be the government agency or it might be the appointed management committee. Those are the basic things that I want you to understand. And we should all equally understand that the relationship between owners and control is different in the non-corporate entity as compared with a company because their aims is different. The aim of establishing the business is different. The major distinction between the two is this. The aim of a non-corporate entity also differ from the profit seeking of a company. That means a company, a corporate entity is established to make profit, maximize the profits, and accumulate the wealth of the shareholders. So they can plug back their profit to expand the business, to have multiple portfolio of investments, all with the aims of achieving high return on investment, achieving return on capital employed. But the aim of the non-corporate entity is to make surplus and not profits. And this surplus that they are making, they are using it to make vital contributions to the society. So their aim is quite different. So we are coming gradually into what we call corporate governance. So I'm giving you all the normal uh, preliminary things, the background that you're supposed to know. And here, the title corporate governance laws and guidance. What we just have to know here is that I want you to understand what we call bad governance and what we call good governance. Apart from the decision, we must know that the best that we can have is to have a good governance because the bad governance will retrogress the progress of the company and it will cause premature death, that is liquidation or collapse of the company. So what do we call bad governance? Bad governance occur when an entity is governed in a way that is inconsistent with certain concepts and practices. So to explain that point, so what I mean there is that Bad governance occur when a company is run in such a way that the directors of the company does not abide with the corporate governance concepts and practices. Equally, bad governance occur when the company is governed for the interests of the directors, when the company is governed for the interests of the directors and not that of the shareholders. So in a bad governance, it occurs when the directors does not abide with corporate governance concepts such as integrity, accountability, uh, transparency, and many more. And again, the directors do not abide or comply with stipulated principles and code of corporate governance. Above all, the director put his own personal interest first, ahead of that of the owners of the business. That is a bad governance. When we have a false accounting, the manipulation of the accounting record is a bad governance, making of secret profit. But when we talk of good governance, it is opposite of bad governance. A good governance occur when a company abide with stipulated laws, regulations. When a company comply with corporate governance principles, when the board of directors have a board balance, when the board of directors have what we call board diversity, and they are working towards going concern and protecting the interests of the shareholders. That is what we call a good governance. So good governance is the best, and we must refrain from anything that we call bad governance. Equally, where I put my cursor here, the syllabus recognize the need to understand what we call the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2022. With Sarbanes-Oxley, how come it is being mentioned? What is governance? The Sarbanes-Oxley Act that was introduced by the American scholar Sarbanes-Oxley is that this act is introduced to improve the quality of corporate governance in United States of America. Developed since of several conglomerate and multinational companies that nobody ever believed that they can collapse in the next 100 decades. That in the next 300 years, nobody ever believed such company can collapse. Example of such company are these. Enron. Enron collapsed. Amazingly, to the surprise, to collapse. The findings shows that the collapse of these multinational companies was due to bad corporate governance. As a result of the bad corporate governance and some evil, inefficient governance that was perpetrated by the board of the directors. So due to this, all nations in the whole world, United States of America, United Kingdom, the likes of France, Colombia, we have Canada, including Nigeria, all of them now have to enact code of corporate governance so that this one will help us to minimize the rates of sudden collapse of all corporate organizations that are making positive contribution to socio-economic development of the nation. So this was developed to trace the antecedents why some multinational companies fail due to bad corporate governance. So in United States of America, in Nigeria, in France, and some other parts of the globe, due to this collapse, I've told you, they now have to come with their own code to regulate the activities of corporate organization. For instance, the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance for the private sector was established in 2018, and it was prepared by Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. So this Code of Corporate Governance, the essence is that it requires companies to comply with the principle and provision of the code. So any company that violates this Code of Corporate Governance, then such a company will face litigation by either the public, individual, or the government. So secondly, we have here, listed companies in United Kingdom are required to comply with the UK Corporate Governance Code. Same with Nigeria. And it's not limited to Nigeria and UK. You can see this. Similarly, Singapore, they have their own Code of Corporate Governance, Ministry of Finance. So the essence of all this code is for us to have a robust laws, regulations, and principles that will guide the activities of all corporate entities so that company will not experience any sudden liquidation or bankruptcy. Next, we have the workers' reports and board behavior. The workers' report and board behavior is similar to that of Sabani Oste that we just look at now, because the workers' report was carried out in 2007. Hello, please, it's network. Let's quickly continue with our lecture. So the network logos are out. So the essence of that workers' report is to pinpoint to some of the factors that cause a collapse of corporate organization when it comes to corporate governance. And some of the factors that was discovered are these. One, serious deficiency in corporate oversight and financial regulations. They discovered that majority of the companies that collapsed, they collapsed due to deficiency in corporate oversight. So there is no proper monitoring control, and there is a financial misappropriation of funds. Majority of the directors, they don't follow the financial regulation policy. Some of them are there to enrich their pockets. As a result of this, they cause issue of bank distress. Two is this: there is excessive risks, because majority of the board of directors, majority of the investments they undertake, they don't look at it critically. They go beyond the risk appetite of the organization. So they don't utilize the risk alarm. So due to this, they cause crisis for the organization because the risks embedded with some of the investments, they are beyond what the company can cope with. And this one leads to the collapse. The chairman of the board of directors is weak. And when the chairman is weak, there can be efficient corporate governance oversight and monitoring and supervision. Four, there is ethnic group, religion, experience, background, discipline, different age. That's what we call board diversity. They discover that the board diversity is weak. So due to that, there is a crisis, and that one led to the collapse of some of the identified companies. And again, they say there is unsatisfactory or no engagement with major owners. They take some drastic decisions without consulting or informing the shareholders for ratification of those decisions. So these are some of the things that we have to avoid. All these five highlighted points are some of the symptoms of bad governance. So, what are the corporate governance issues? Anytime you see corporate governance issue, the corporate governance issue simply means that the areas that corporate governance discuss or covers. So some of the strategic areas or covered by corporate governance are: one, the role and responsibility of the board of directors. All the board of directors should have a clear understanding of their roles, their duties, and they should know that they will be accountable to all these roles and responsibility given to them. Two, we got discussed on that now. The composition and balance of the board of directors. This is very key. It is germane to successful corporate governance. The board should have a balanced composition. You must have a CEO, chairman of the board. You must have executive directors. You must have non-executive directors. You must have independent non-executive directors. And in the areas of board diversity, we must have different ethnics, different religion, different experience, different ages. All these must be part of our board of directors. So that is what we mean by board composition and balance. Financial reporting. The board of directors must ensure they comply with regulations and law and principles guiding financial reporting. And in their financial reporting, they need to be transparent. And this has to be done with good faith. There should be periodic financial reporting stipulated by the law and disclosure. At the same time, the director's remuneration, contributing involved in a lot of business and investment management. They manage a lot of risks. So it is advisable, as stated in law, that the remuneration of the director should be attractive. In fact, it must be attached with performance-related incentives. Also, the corporate governance discusses about the need to have risk management and internal control. Because when these two is lacking, the company is at the verge of collapse. So the company directors must identify and pronounce the acceptable risk level. That is what we call risk appetite that the company can bear. Under no circumstance should the directors involved in any investment that has higher risks than the risk appetite of the company. And we must have a very good internal control to prevent the shareholders' right is equally one of the major things that happen to be the focus of corporate governance. All these rights of the shareholders must not be violated. Their interests must come first. All major decisions in the company must be communicated to the shareholders. And the shareholders too, they have the right to appoint and the right to remove directors, and they have the right to vote. Issue of corporate social responsibility is equally discussed in corporate governance. So let's proceed. The Enron issue, we have discussed about the Enron issue. I told you that Enron and the Wacom, that world conglomerate company that collapsed. And the reason why they collapsed has been stated by Sabani Osley out of 2002 and Workers' Report of 2017. The basic factors that are attributed to the collapse of multinational companies due to bad corporate governance are still this. We have mentioned it. One is false accounting. Two, the audit committee, when they gave approval to serious misleading annual financial statement. So I expect others to join through the new link that was sent to us some couple of minutes now. The previous one time us out. We are sorry about that. Let's continue. So we are looking at Lunar 7 principle of public life. And this one is not limited to public life. It covers both companies, non-profit entities, and the rest. That all managers or directors that occupy the public positions, they occupy the directorship positions. So they must abide with all these principles. So the principles are one, that is selflessness. You can see that all these principles too align with the concepts of the corporate governance. So selflessness is one of the principles. Because of time, let us spell it out. Two, integrity. Three, objectivity. You must work with objectivity and not with subjective decisions. And things have to be based on merit. Number four, principle of Noland for public life is accountability. While five is openness, six honesty, and seven leadership. Because the leadership style we use, be it democratic leadership style, autocratic, or laissez-faire. So all this leadership is a major determinant of how we have harmonious relationship within the organization and achievement of goals. So we must use a leadership style that suits the whatever situation or challenges at hand. So because leadership is situational. So next we have agency theory. So what do we call agency theory? Why is it essential in corporate governance? The reason why this agency, the word agency as a topic is essential here is just for us to have an understanding that the relationship between the shareholders that are the owner of the company and that of the directors that are managing the company for the shareholders is an agency relationship. So in this relationship now, we can refer to the shareholders as the principal that owns the business, while the agents are the directors and the employees. Hello? Okay, thank God our this thing is intact. I thought the network strip off. So the fiduciary duty is the duty of trust. You must act with good faith. All major strategic decisions taken in that organization, all the shareholders must be informed about all these decisions. But that's the reason why we are being employed. And in the duty, fiduciary duty, the fiduciary duty equally states that the directors must not breach this duty of trust. Because if you breach the duty, you could be liable in law. They can sue you. You can lose your job. A lot of things can occur. So all the directors, the non-executive directors, the executive managers, the CEO must work based on trust and abide with laws and regulations. So that is the meaning of that fiduciary duty in concept of an agency. So the agency theory talks about the relationship between the owner and the managers, and this relationship must be well managed. So the basic things that we have under the agency theory. So when you look at all these things, the agency relationship, the agency relationship tells you that when the directors and the owners of the company comes together, they have different interests. But the more the shareholders as employ you as director, the conflict of interest must be avoided. The conflict of interest must be avoided because the interest of the shareholders want to increase their income
I
and wealth.
cannot see your screen, sir.
What do you say?
I cannot see your screen.
Okay, I've shared the screen. It's network that interrupted. Let me reshare it. Hello, can we proceed now? Because the
Yes,
network is fluctuating. The slide has been shared severally.
you can see it now.
Okay, the network is bad. We are very sorry about that, please. Let's quickly proceed. Thank you. So we have agency conflicts. So this agency conflict refers to issues that can bring about misunderstanding or conflicting interests between the directors and the shareholders. or we can see the agency conflict as those activities that are being perpetrated by the directors that can bring annoyance or discomfort to the shareholders. So some of the agency conflicts that bring about conflict of interest are this. One, moral hazard. The moral hazard implies that a manager has an interest in receiving benefits from his or her position as a manager. And this benefits include status, cars, access to scholarship for the children, access to the company airplane and what have you, many other incentives. But majority of these directors, some of them are still not contented with all these benefits they are giving them. So some felt they still need to be a shareholder to the company and some other benefits. When all these things are not given, the shareholders will not be contented. The directors will not be contented and will be doing or perpetrating some activities that can give them additional gains. And this one will not augur well with the whole company. That is what we call moral hazard. Effort level. At the effort level, ideally, all managers may work less hard than they would have been if they are the owners of the company. But because of the fact that they knew their reward and some companies' increment in salary is attached to their effort, that is performance related benefit. So this one makes some directors to work harder in order for them to earn more reward and benefit. But in some instances whereby the directors is one of the major shareholders of the company, some of them allow complacence, laziness at times. So the earning retention is a very good thing at times that I know because the remuneration of the directors and the senior manager is related to the size of the company. So all because the directors know that the bigger the company, the bigger their investments, the bigger their earnings that they are going to take. Such director will now work intensively. They work spiritedly to ensure that they grow the company so that their earnings, their returns, share offers, and other rewards will be higher. So risk aversion too. It is expected here, I've informed you, that as an individual, not necessarily director, any business that we are entering into, we must look at the risks attached to the business. Well, that risk has something to do with our income, it has something to do with the amount we invested. We can lose the amount invested, which is millions of billions, if the level of risk is not evaluated, if the level of the risk is high. So majority of the directors, they are risk averse. That they are reluctant. Risk averse means that the directors of the management are risk averse because they are reluctant to invest in higher risk projects. And when you look at it in some instances, this might conflict with some shareholders because some shareholders felt let's invest in high risk projects. So far, the profit attached is higher. But the directors know the implication of this. They might not want to go into it, no matter how calculated the level of the risk. So the time horizon too. The time horizon is another factors that can come under the agency cost. And what do you mean by the time horizon? Directors always be cautious or be inquisitive to know the kind of investments they do. The time it will start yielding profits. So some shareholders might want curiosity for short-term gains, while the director will want long-term sustainability projects. But when you look at it generally, managers might not be interested in short-term investment or performance because this one is detrimental to the company and it will not give them anything that we call sustainable growth. So apart from that, we have agency cost. The simple meaning of agency cost is this. Let me tell you the simple meaning. Agency cost means all the total amount of money that the shareholders, owner of the company spend in ensuring proper running of the company. That is agency cost. All the money that the shareholders spend in monitoring the activities of the board of directors, and that money they are paying to whistleblower that give them information on what is happening. Those are the things that we call agency costs. Okay, so the agency cost now, since we know the meaning, cover one, cost of monitoring. The cost of monitoring the activities of the shareholders, getting information, the amount of money we are paying to whistleblower money is part of the agency cost. Residual cost. Residual cost means the total amount of money that the shareholders pay to take a redress, be it in the court or in the board of the directors. Because anything that we call residual activities, they are activities that the directors of the company take that are not in the best interest of the shareholders. So to correct these anomalies, all the total amount of money that we spend there is what we call residual losses. Bonding costs. The bonding costs refer to the amount of money expended by the shareholders to satisfy the directors. All the money they pay as incentives, apart from the basic salary. All the money they pay as part of performance-related benefits, private cars, and many more. Those are what we call bonding costs. So how can we reduce all these agency problems and agency costs? What we can do to reduce agency problem and agency costs are one, to devise a remuneration package for executive directors and senior managers, meaning that we should give an attractive and robust salary to all the executive directors and senior management in the company. Two, to have a large proportion of debt on the long-term capital structure of the company. Three, you must have a board of directors that are experienced in corporate oversight and monitoring. The board of directors that will monitor the decision taking by the executive management. It reduces our agency problem and agency costs. Four is to ensure greater accountability. The executive manager, executive directors, the non-executive directors, independent non-executive directors should be accountable for whatever role or decision they take. This one minimizes agency problem and agency costs. So now we have the board of directors. So the board of directors that we mentioned, they are vested with authority to control, monitor, and supervise the activities of the executive manager and to ensure effective corporate oversight. This board of directors, they have to delegate responsibility to executive management. The board of directors have to ensure they monitor the decision of the executive managers. They supervise the activities of the management and provide strategic directions. So the board of directors must work in line in conjunction with the chief executive officer of the company. But because the CEO is always the chairman of the board of the directors. So when they work hand in hand, it takes a lot for us to have effective and efficient board supervision and management. At the same time, we must know that the board of directors, they must have independent non-executive directors that perform some exclusive roles, but they must not be a full-time employees. That was the findings and contributions of Farmer. Because Farmer and Jensen in 1983, they argued that for effective board management, a board must consist largely of independent non-executive directors. The essence of this is that The independent non-executive directors, they have no executive role in the company, and they are not a full-time employees. With that, they can assist us to monitor the activities in the company. They will assist us in the areas of conflict management, and they'll be able to assist the non-executive directors in the area of determining remuneration package, ensuring accountability in the company. So that's the role of the independent non-executive directors. And all the executive directors, non-executive directors, and appointed agents of the company, they must be accountable. They must give reports on all their daily activities. So because of constraints of time, let's go to another important thing that ICAN takes, because we have to look at those topics that they test regularly. That is theories of corporate governance. Theories of corporate governance. This is a regular customer in ICAN for about 2-3 diets now. They don't set it. You never can tell this forthcoming diet, it can be tested. Theories of corporate governance. So the theories of corporate governance comprise of the following. One, transaction cost theory. Transaction cost theory. The transaction cost theory states that companies always have a radical decision on economic gains and profit maximization. But this theory now advises directors and shareholders of the company that they must not overplace curiosity for profit maximization as the only objective of the company. Rather, company must ensure that they pay attention for good internal structures. They must pay attention to integration of functional activities, that is internal synergy. They must treat their employees fairly and with equity. The transactional theory has two basic assumptions. It is based on two assumptions or premises. The first assumption is what we call bounded rationality. By that bounded rationality, it implies that the human act rationally, meaning that the directors act rationally, but within certain limits of understanding. So what this one means, because of the constraint of time, is that in a bounded rationality, the directors are not perfect. They have limits of what they can do. As a result of that, the shareholders, the non-executive directors, all other investors and employees, they must support these directors to achieve maximum value and objective of the company, so that whatever their limit of thinking or performance or delivery, we can be able to complement this to achieve collective goals. That is what we call bounded rationality. The second assumption of the transaction theory is opportunism. The opportunism means that individual employees, directors, and all board members, they act in self-interest. That we don't have to deceive ourselves. Those that does not show this self-interest trait, they don't have the opportunity to do so. But anytime they have the opportunity, they take what we call opportunistic behavior to take advantage of the company, to perpetrate fraud. So due to that, we have to ensure we orientate all our staff on the need for honesty and to use whistleblower to monitor the activities of the directors and all other employees. That is transaction theory. Stewardship theory, just from the mere meaning of steward, slave. So the stewardship theory is saying that the directors of the company, they are steward to the owners of the company. As a result of that, the stewardship theory recognizes that the director of the company have a stewardship role to play to the shareholders. And what are the stewardship role? By now you should know it. The stewardship role are: one, protect the interests of the shareholders, protect the investments of the shareholders, protect and accumulate the wealth of the shareholders, act with utmost good faith, protect the reputation of the company and that of the shareholders. The third theory is the resource dependence theory. Resource dependence theory. The resource dependence theory argue that the only way company can achieve sustainable growth, the only way company can achieve improve and increase competitive advantage is for the company to depend largely on their internal resources, such as materials, labor, capital, machines, methodology, and minimum. So, in summary, the resource dependence theory is saying that achieving competitive advantage and going concern by organization, including profitability, rests heavily on the ability to use the internal resources of the company to achieve results. That is the resource dependence theory. The next theory is managerial hegemony theory and class hegemony theory. So, what this theory is saying is that the directors of the company, the executive managers, they occupy strategic positions. They are among the apex decision maker in the company. As a result of that, they belong to the upper class. You can see they belong to the business elite, that is upper class. So they control effective governance, monitoring, and supervision in the company. And when you look at it in managerially too, they have the power to exercise decision on all other employees. But this power must be checkmate. They must use this judiciously. They must use the power with accountability and honesty and equity without jeopardizing the investments of the shareholders. That is what the managerial hegemony and class hegemony theory discuss about. So we have the stakeholders theory. The stakeholders theory under corporate governance emphasize for the need to have interrelationship with all stakeholders in the organization. What does that mean? The stakeholders theory advocates that all the stakeholders, including the employees of the workers, the support staff, they play a pivotal role towards the achievements of the company goals. As a result of that, we must duly compensate them. We must motivate them. We must reward them. We must pay them salary that commensurates with their effort or inputs. And we should provide a conducive working atmosphere for all the stakeholders and avoid indiscriminate sacking of these stakeholders. They must have job security and their voice must be heard. That's the stakeholders theory. So next we have the system theory. So what the system theory discuss about is that the system theory says that organization is a system that has so many units. All these units must be linked together. All the units must work harmoniously with unity. There must be team unity, teamwork, division of labor, and synergy in the organization so that we can achieve collective responsibilities. No unit or department should work in isolation, but rather they must work together. That is what the system theory talks about. So, what is the relationship between governance and information technology? So, the relationship is that the functional scope of a company must integrate information system. And as we all know, we are now in a digital age now. We are in digital era. So no company is advised to continue to do their business in a manual way. such a company will not grow. The company will be static, or with time, they are going to exceed the industry where they are operating. So the functional scope of corporate governance can be integrated with technology to achieve the following. One, financial operations. Technology will assist us in the areas of financial operations. Two, it will enhance our marketing and sales performance. Three, it will foster effective administrative functions and processing. It will improve our human resources management. It will bring about investment in information technology and system. And this one will aid innovation, research and development, and many more. Apart from that, information technology will bring about effective governance in that it will help us in the areas of risk management system and internal control system. It will assist in the areas of formulation and implementation of strategy, including evaluation of strategy and control. It will promote the corporate compliance with laws and regulations. So these are some of the benefits of information technology. So that's what the syllabus required. I've stated that. So we now have different approaches to corporate governance. What are the approaches to corporate governance? There are basically two approaches to corporate governance. We have one, rule-based approach, and we have two, principle-based approach. Those are the two approaches, please. You are not expected to write on any other thing than this in exam because the syllabus has not been reviewed. This is what the syllabus limits us to. We too, we are updating ourselves as a lecturer too. Up to now, the approach to corporate governance globally has not increased. It's still these two. Maybe by the time ICAN review or there's any other information prior to our exam on this, will let us know. So the approach to corporate governance are two. We have rule-based approach and we have the principle-based approach. These approaches are very simple. I'm going to simplify it because we have some preambles, further information on it, underneath. But let me just simplify it so that we can go to the rule-based approach and the principle-based approach alone. So the material that we are using, I'm going to drop this material immediately after this lecture. Okay, the rule-based approach now. The rule-based approach comprises of laws and government regulations. That is what we call rule-based approach. A rule-based approach comprises of laws that all listed companies must comply with. That means all listed companies that their shares are listed on the Nigerian thing, they must abide with this rule-based approach. Even some companies that their shares are not listed, they use this for effective governance. They abide with all this rule-based approach for effective functioning, monitoring, supervision, and management. So with the rule-based approach, it will help us to increase the rate of compliance of companies, and it will help us to avoid rates of sudden collapse, liquidation, or business failure that leads to loss of investment. So the rule-based approach has some laws, rules, regulations that company must abide with without violation. It's total compliance. They have zero tolerance for non-compliance. So what are the benefits of the rule-based approach? The benefit of the rule-based approach is that, one, companies do not have choice of ignoring the rules. You must adhere rigidly to all these rules. You must abide 100% compliance. Because failure to comply with this, they will sue you to court. Litigation will be placed against the company. Two, another advantage of the rule-based approach is that it promotes uniformity of standards. What I mean by that uniformity of standard is that all companies are required to meet the same minimum standards of corporate governance. No disparity. And three, the rule-based approach increase investors' confidence. The investors' confidence increase since they know now that there are laws guiding these things by the government. And we have a regulated agency that implements all this rule. I've mentioned one, Nigerian Stock Exchange is a good example. So what are the disadvantages of the rule-based approach? The disadvantage of the rule-based approach is that the rules might not be suitable for complaints due to different sizes, disparity in their nature of business, and those that are not that are not a listed company. Another disadvantage, major disadvantage of rule-based approach is that it is not flexible. The rule-based approach is not flexible. That's another major disadvantages. And this rule-based approach, as you can see, we have it across different nations. In the United States, we have it. In the United Kingdom, we have it. We have all the rule-based approach. So the principle-based approach, this is the second one. Principle-based approach to corporate governance. Let's quickly look at the principle-based approach to corporate governance. The principle-based approach serves as an alternative to the rule-based approach, but it doesn't serve, or it is not developed to eliminate rule-based approach. It is designed to provide a relief. Under the principle-based approach, please note, it is the shareholder that presides on any matter arising in the principle-based approach. In a principle-based approach, thank God we are back, it is the shareholder that oversees the implementation and compliance with the principle-based approach. But under the rule-based approach is the court. So the principle-based approach comprises of some principles that directors of the companies must abide with. Failure to abide with this principle will attract capital punishment, and it might even bring to loss of job. It might lead to loss of job by the directors. All these principles at times can be changed based on the improvements or new developments in the areas of corporate governance. So the principle-based approach serves as an alternative and not as a replacement to rule-based approach. And this principle-based approach should be applied by all companies. It should be applied to all companies. The benefit of the principle-based approach is that the directors have opportunity for what we call comply or explain. What do you mean by comply or explain? Anytime the director, maybe individual director or the board of director or executive manager, violates any fundamental aspect of this principle, before any decision or capital punishment is being taken by the shareholders, they give the director opportunity for comply or explain. Comply or explain means that explain to us the reason why you fail to comply with section 2 subsection 3 of the principle base. That's what we call this comply or explain. If the excuse is given by the directors or individual director or executive manager is genuine, then the shareholders can overlook it and warn the directors. But if the excuses are not genuine and has committed a fundamental violation of the principle, such directors can have a query, such directors can be sacked. So the comply or explain, the approach is sometimes called comply or explain. It applies in the United Kingdom, for example. With a comply or explain, if a director, for example, now let's say for instance, sell a share to the public because of liquidity problem without informing the shareholders first, it has violated the principle. Why do you sell share to the public without informing the shareholders first? So you have to explain us why you do this without complying with all the principles. So the principle of corporate governance have opportunity for comply or explain. And if they ask us which one is more effective, it depends on the situations. Which is more effective, a rule-based approach or principle-based approach? Both of them are effective because there is no conclusive evidence that stated that one is better than another. So depending on the situation, for a listed rule, a listed complaint, rule-based approach is okay. For all other complaints too that use principle-based approach, then it is okay. Both of them are very, very, very essential. So Nigeria International Code of Principle of Corporate Governance, what does it contain? The International Code and Principle of Corporate Governance of Nigeria cover so many areas with that
Your
of
slide
national
has not
corporate
come back.
governance.
So you can
So the
find the
main
next.
issues that we have us requirement for board committee. All these things you must know it, you practice it. 4, it discusses about the performance evaluation of the board of directors. So the code of corporate governance in Nigeria, similar to that of
Your
international.
slide is not yet back, sir.
What do you say?
Your slide is not yet back since when you went off. I wrote in the
It's not yet back.
yes, since the
Oh
time you
wow.
went off.
Sorry, the network is bad today. I'm very, very sorry, but you will have informed me earlier. Sorry about
I
that. Let
can't
me
see it in
quickly.
the chat, but you didn't read it.
Oh, sorry, I was carried away. Sorry. Thank you. God bless you. Have you seen the slide now?
Yes,
Hello? Okay.
yes.
So we said that the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, just like the International Code of Corporate Governance, discuss on the fundamental of corporate governance that all companies must have or abide with. One, it discuss on the role of the board of directors, the structure and composition of the board of directors, the board meeting, the performance evaluation of the board that should be done periodically, the remuneration of the governance because they must be well remunerated, all directors, and the amount of remuneration we give to the executive directors must be higher than that of the non-executive directors. And we must know that the executive directors, under the remuneration governance now, the executive directors will have incentives and other reward package, but non-executive directors are not given this. We still come to that in some of our subsequent lectures. So risk management and internal audit, including the whistleblowing, should be reflected, and this one must be properly taken care of. The relationship between the board and the shareholders, it discusses on the sustainability and transparency, that is disclosure. So these are some of the cogent subheadings or information that we have in the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance. So the essence of the International Code of Corporate Governance and Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance is for us to have good corporate governance oversight, monitoring, supervision, and control. So the international statement of corporate governance principles are about 3. So this hardly come out. So the 3 international statements of corporate governance are the OECD principle of corporate governance. I will expatiate on this in our next lecture. The ICAN statement have that of corporate governance in the Commonwealth. But the major principle of this international corporate governance body is that their focus is for us to have one, better governance, because they believe that better governance will attract more investments from global investors. But majority of the global investors now, apart from the fact that Nigeria is improving in the area of uh, governance, The insecurity is discouraging a lot of foreign investors. Insecurity, the economic situation in Nigeria, and some many more stringent, unfriendly things that discourage the major investors. Secondly, is that the international corporate governance and that of Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance statement will bring about company will benefit from more investment finance to increase their profits. When we have good principles guiding the corporate governance, we are going to benefit from the foreign direct investments, which is going to increase the earnings of the company. Thirdly, national economy will benefit from having a strong and profitable companies. Yes, because these companies will be socially responsible. They will pay their tax. They are going to make contribution to socio-economic development of the nation. And that's the more reason why all these international bodies, they are very essential to complaints. Uh, Permit me to stop here because I have another class now. I've reached about 17 minutes into that class. So by next week, we continue from where we stop, or probably I will divide this slide into two. So sorry about the persistent interruption in the network, is beyond us. And I'm going to drop the material as I promised now, so that we can read ahead of our next class. So the other areas that we have, board diversity, board structure, corporate disclosure, all these things will be discussed, God willing, by next week. So I appreciate your commitment. God will crown your effort. Thank you very much. So we meet next week by the grace of God. Bye for now.